When we don't know the facts, we often advocate and side with those doing harm. I was having a conversation with somebody last night who I know is politically believes themselves to be on the opposite spectrum of me, but as we were navigating the conversation, they kept pulling out facts that weren't true. They were talking about their beliefs about welfare, and when I stated that the average person only stays on welfare for 2 years, and that one of the largest groups of people that actually tap into and use welfare benefits are fully employed, and a good chunk of them are actually Walmart employees. Because they kept defending capitalism and they kept saying that capitalism doesn't need more regulation. But then I said, well, you have a problem with your tax dollars going to pay for welfare, but the largest consumers of welfare are not people who are unemployed or who have been on it long term, but are on it because their employer won't pay them a livable wage. There was a time when that wasn't possible. And it required regulation. It required that CEOs were not allowed to pay people less than, to make more than 20 times their lowest paid employee, that a certain level of income was taxed at 90%, right, over what was more than enough to live off of. That's regulation. So if you don't like your tax dollars supplementing people's income, and people's income has to be supplemented because organizations aren't required to pay people a livable wage, then the problem is not the people who have no power in the situation. The problem is the people who have all the power in the situation who are denying people the ability to have thriving wages. And when I told her that the average person is only on welfare for 2 years, so they don't have time to pop out all the babies the way that they were explaining, and I showed them these facts, they suddenly had nothing to say. Because they were in fact beginning to advocate for eugenics as a response to get people off of welfare, to require people who are going on welfare to in fact have to go through and get some kind of thing inserted, either an IUD or a thing in their arm, to prevent them from being able to reproduce while on welfare. And I said, well, she's like, well, it would just be taken out when they're off. What you're advocating for is eugenics. If they have to take and then she was talking about people having to take a test to decide whether or not they should be allowed to have children. And I said, pause, stop. You are neurodivergent. Do you realize until the mid-1980s, until 1984, and I think some states were even after that people like you and me were able to be institutionalized, lobotomized, and forcibly sterilized. You're advocating for your own harm because you pretend that you're immune from the harm that you're proposing. The history of the United States is one of enslavement, of eugenics. You agree with me that what is being done against the Palestinian people is in fact a genocide, but it is their ethnic difference that is being used to justify said genocide. But then you're turning around and advocating for eugenics, which would be used against you because you are in fact white passing, but not in fact white. Your family lineage is from that exact region in the world. She's Lebanese. And so as we're navigating this conversation, I didn't address every single thing that she brought up because I don't want a conversation to turn combative. But I was in fact able to consistently combat what she was saying, right? When it felt like, okay, I don't want this to turn, like I don't want either one of us to get defensive. I just want to tell you that what you're saying is factually incorrect. And I think when we can speak truth to mis and disinformation and we can actively show the data, right? Because then I was able to say to her, well, illegal immigrants, I don't believe there's such a thing, but that's how the IRS denotes them, right? Paid $96 billion in taxes last year, and most of it went to state budgets and Medicare and Social Security, which your parents are benefiting from. You would be okay with those being completely defunct, right? And she's like, well, I'm okay with it. I didn't ask that. I didn't ask what you're okay with giving up. I said, what are you okay with taking away from other people, right? So when we're able to combat this mis and disinformation, I think there are people who genuinely don't care about the facts, who are so angry and disenfranchised, there's not an ability for there to be rational thought. There has to be healing first before there can be rational thought. I don't think that those people are beyond help. I just think it's a different pathway. But there are others who we can engage in these conversations with. And as a woman, I realized just how much power my voice has quite a few years ago, and realized because of that, I needed to make sure that I educated myself so I could navigate these conversations well, and in the moment know how to show and tell what the truth actually is. But if we're not learning, if we're not consistently able to have these conversations with people, how do we expect society to change? Because I really genuinely know that so many people are so inundated with mis and disinformation and so scared and so harmed that they are looking for these quick one-off solutions that feel like, okay, well, do you really think if we defund welfare, they're going to tax you less? You really think that? No. Do you really think that you should and everybody else should get less and less for the taxes you do pay? Do you really believe that? When I said to her, in Europe, they only pay, 40 some odd percent in taxes, but they've got their healthcare covered. Now, there are flaws in these systems. I'm not saying they're perfect, but they have their healthcare, they have their education, they have childcare, right? They have paid parental leave, they have paid vacation requirements, right? They have a pension for when they retire, right? Those are legally required things, right? It's not a 401k that your company can choose to opt into, but you have to mostly fund with your dollars before they will contribute at max, 4 or 5%. It's a very different thing, right? And she's like, no, they pay 60%. No, they don't here. I can show you. And if you look at the average of what people pay tax-wise, it's actually less than 30%. Yeah. But just for shits and giggles, let's say it's 40%. Let's say it's a little bit more than 40%. Are you really looking me dead in the fucking face and telling me that you wouldn't pay just a few percentage points more, right? And have all of those things covered that will definitely amount to more over your lifetime than the 7% increase, 7 to 10% increase you would pay. And you're really telling me that you wouldn't want to put a 1% tax on billionaires? They wouldn't even fucking feel it. Would be like goddamn pocket change. Like a couple of states in this country have done, Washington State being an example, that now is able to cover childcare and food inside of schools and education and so on and so forth, right? And I think it was Maine that also did this, and it was able to provide free state college to everyone, right? And childcare. Like, you're really telling me that? Because we're talking about a tax on billionaires, something you'll never be. I don't think that's what they're really saying. I just don't think that they're used to hearing all the facts in a coherent manner. They're not used to somebody being able to actually show them the truth so very fucking quickly, and they're certainly not doing the research themselves. And I don't know about you, but yeah, I could cut people out of my life who don't agree with me, but how the fuck are we ever going to change society if we do? As long as I'm physically safe with that person and emotionally safe with that person, meaning they're not going to attack me, whether verbally or physically, I'm going to have the difficult conversations every fucking time.